Today, we welcome back a guest whose work continues to challenge how we think about faith, transformation, and the inner life. In our previous conversation, we explored the prayer of freedom and the profound idea that spiritual alignment can unlock personal breakthrough. In part one of our new conversation, we're diving into Beatty's latest book, Outrageous Peace, where he presents a powerful and sometimes surprising message that peace is not something we achieve through effort, but something that naturally returns when alignment is restored. I hope that you enjoyed part one of this interview with author, speaker, and transformation expert, Beatty Carmichael. So, Beatty, welcome back to Different Facets of Happiness. Your last visit and the prayer of freedom deeply resonated with our audience. And thank you for coming back again, by the way.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be back.
Yes. So, how does it feel to return knowing the impact that that conversation had?
Vindicated. You know, I so I've had the book out for several years, even my own children haven't read it, and recently I've been vindicated, and now they're reading it, they're sharing it with others. So I say that kinda tongue in cheek, but it makes me feel really good because, what happens is there's so much that we hear,
Mhm.
all kinds of fix-its and magic bullets to solve this problem and that. And to have people really understand and start to embrace, or at least be willing to embrace positively what's going on, I feel really pleased with that because I'm not sure if I shared last time, but I've abandoned my business to get this message out. And God has basically told me, drop it, put it aside, focus on this. And so this is my passion.
When you look back on the prayer of freedom, what surprised you the most about how people responded and have they?
It's real. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm always surprised when people reject it. But then this is we were talking about this a little bit off camera, is what seems so natural for me, because I've now lived it for 10 years, I forget that it's quite radical for some people, and I forget that I come from that standpoint where I would have completely rejected it, almost entirely, because it contradicted my framework that I understood to actually go on, and And so I think that's kind of been my big takeaway is, "Oh, that's right, Beatty. Remember, not everyone has walked through the shoes where you've walked through." I hate to say it, can I tell you a really funny
Yeah,
story?
yeah.
Okay. So, for, listeners to kinda catch them back up to speed, the premise with the prayer of freedom is maybe there's something that a sin that you committed that is at the root of something. So I was at a church meeting and church visiting, and there was this woman there, and she was complaining about some chronic pain or something. So I started to just naturally, well, have you had this type of sin? You done this or that? And she was cringing a little bit. And it wasn't until I left, I said, "Ooh, probably went a little bit too deep too fast," because she has no grid for it. But for me, it was just like normal stuff. So I'm always catching myself on that one.
So, would it be fair to say that the prayer of freedom awakens something in people, and your latest book, Outrageous Peace, is asking them to live it? And let's talk about Outrageous Peace because some people may not know or have heard of that. But if you can just talk about that book for a second.
Yeah. So as my son says it, "Dad, you wrote the sequel first." Outrageous Peace actually in sequence is the first step right before the prayer of freedom. And here's the basic premise. Outrageous Peace is if you think about a swimming pool, Jackie, this whole concept of the spiritual realm in which we operate and the impact of things that we do impacting us is like a swimming pool. The prayer of freedom, throw you into the deep end. Outrageous peace is let's walk in at the zero entry level and just start to understand the environment. So, what outrageous peace is all about is helping people understand that if there are issues that we've been dealing with that just don't go away. And there's like a constant tension in our life, a constant something underneath the surface that you're always irritable or always tense or always something. And we don't know what it is, but we try to exercise more, we try to think better, we try to do more meditative prayers, and it still doesn't go away. then what's happening is on the inside, what you're typically experiencing is the lack of peace. Peace, in a very simplistic sense, is nothing bothers you. You can have chaos and stress all around your life, but internally, you're rock solid.
Yeah.
One of the neighbors in my street, she has on the back of her car a sign that says, "I run to get the crazies out." And so what she's saying is, there's something going on in me that just makes me crazy. She's irritable all the time, and she's trying to run it out. But what happens is when you're dealing with an internal issue, you can't fix it with an external approach. And that's the basic premise of Outrageous Pieces, helping people start to see this world and the things that impact us at a different viewpoint, different framework that now puts some methodology as to why they're feeling these things, and most importantly, how to start to release it very gently.
So, but Beta, people may say, the title itself, it's so provocative.
It
Like,
is.
yes, why did you choose the word outrageous to describe peace?
It's because the piece really can be outrageous once you understand it. When I say outrageous, think about this. Let me give you a framework to sort of grasp this with. Think about a three-legged stool, and this stool represents our life. There's three legs to it. You have the mental, the physical, and the spiritual. And the spiritual is not a religious spiritual. It's neither mental nor physical. When all three legs of that stool are strong, then the stool is sturdy. You can stand on it, you can jump on it, you can put a lot of weight on it. That still represents our life. When we are strong in the mental, physical, and spiritual, nothing can come against us that will rock us. We're rock solid. That means, something happens in at business, something happens with the relationship, something happens with physical health, and I'm going to be stable. I can handle it. But once one of those legs starts to weaken, then you start to have problems. And most of the time, what weakens is that spiritual leg, this internal alignment that when we hold on to something internally that we weren't made to hold on to, that third leg weakens, which now puts stress on the other two legs. And when you stress mental and physical, you start to get things like anxiety or depression or chronic pain or allergies and things of that sort that just starts to crumble your life. And now there's this internal stress. The longer it goes, there's just something inside that just it won't shut off. And once you learn to get rid of it, it's outrageous. It's like you can go back into those environments that used to crumble you and pummel you, and now it's rock solid. You're peaceful on the inside, no matter what's hitting you on the outside. That's kind of what outrageous peace is
Okay,
all about.
I get it. So, was this book written more from hope, frustration, or necessity?
This book was actually written as to give people hope hope with an understanding of what's going on. Let me give you a real example on this.
Mhm.
So I was saying, I've just got this anxiety and it's just destroying my life. Everything is going sour. And he said, "Can you help?" Because I was engaging me with that level. And my actual comment was, "Oh, sure, anxiety is easy to get rid of." Now he had just come from the doctor 6 months earlier, and the doctor diagnosed him with anxiety and said, "You're going to have this the rest of your life. So let's get you on meds." And so for me to let him know, oh, anxiety is easy to get rid of, it's like, who do you believe, the doctor
Right. Yeah.
or me? And so I simply asked him a question. I understand that anxiety is something is out of balance internally, out of alignment. And I asked him, When did this begin?" He
Mhm.
said, "About a year and a half ago." I said, "What happened?" He said, "My wife had a breast exam. They found some lumps, and I became terribly afraid." I said, "Well, that's the problem. You became afraid and you held on to fear. That's misalignment internally." So I led him to simply release that fear because there's nothing he could do about it anyway, right? Whether he holds on to fear or not, there's pragmatic steps to work on with his wife, but holding on to fear does no good. So I guided him in a very simple, what I would call a non religious meditative prayer. that simply allowed his inner self to release that fear.
Okay, so
But
Beatty, I have to interrupt you because I'm going to ask you, are you able to share that prayer with us?
it's a process, but yes, I'm not trying to push people to the book, but it's chapter 8, and it's basically a way let me give you the essence of it, okay? Because the essence is what we're trying to get to, is you simply say, "I release that fear. I know that fear is wrong, and I release it and let it go." That's basically all he did. And then by the end of the day, the anxiety was completely gone. So what you find is this. Let me see if this starts to make some more sense. Let me go inside for a moment. I talked about this inner self. Some people call it a conscience, some people call it an inner self or a moral compass. But this is that thing that says, when I help someone out, I feel really good. When I hurt someone or do something wrong, I feel guilty, and no one has to tell me that I did right or wrong. So, this internal alignment is designed to guide us in peace, to stay within that center section of that alignment where we're holding on to nothing bad, and it's guiding us into doing more good. Once something shocks that alignment and we don't let it go, we hold on to it. It could be stress and work, and now start to internalize the stress and I won't let it go. Or maybe someone hurts me and I hold bitterness and unforgiveness toward them, and I know I should forgive them, but I don't. So these are the type of things that I'm holding on to. Someone gets me really upset and I just get really angry,
Yeah.
and I'm always angry at that person and I don't let it go. So these are the type of things that what happens is we push it, we just move beyond it. We just buckle up and move on, and we forget about it. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to move on. But we never release it. This is the key. What happens is this inner self is saying, let it go. And I'm going, no. Do you know what they did to me? Absolutely not. I can't let it go. So now we crush our inner self and say, shut up and stop talking to me about letting that guy go. So it clams up. I'm now traumatizing to a degree that inner self. And so it's holding on to this thing that it's not designed to, and it starts to weaken that third leg, and things start to crumble. Peace starts to thin. It doesn't disappear overnight, but it starts to thin. And the longer we go with that thing that we're holding on to, and then maybe another thing and another thing, now it's putting a lot of internal strain in our inner self, and we feel tense, we feel anxious, we feel irritable, feel heavy all the time, like we're carrying around a backpack of bricks. We start to feel dark in our mind. This idea of being that in peace doesn't occur. We'll do things in our life to try to create calm. We'll shut out the doors, close the door, turn on some soft music, turn down the lights, and just try to calm. Or we'll go on a vacation, just put everything aside, and we're calm. But once we get out of that fixed environment, it's all right back, because peace is from the inside, it's not from the outside. And so this is what's happening in our lives. And to release it, you simply have to give that inner self. This is back to your question. What did this guy do to release it? First off, he gave his inner self permission to identify where it came from. So here's three simple steps. You name it, locate it, release it. Okay. So if I were to dissect him, then it would be name it. I've got this anxiety and just tearing me up. Locate it. What's going on? Where's the fear coming from? Then his inner self goes back to a year and a half ago. He remembers this instant. So now we identify it and we locate it, and then we release it. See, what happens a lot of times, we put things behind us. My own daughter had the same thing happen. She came to me at 23 years old and said, Dad, would you help me get rid of my night terrors? Didn't even know she had them. I said, yeah, that's probably pretty easy because it's misalignment. Something is causing fear.
Yeah.
So I led her in a simple process just to give her inner self permission to go search out what what is it holding on to? And what came up, and sometimes it comes up quickly, sometimes it's over several days. But the key is that you're not working at it. You give the assignment to your inner self, say basically permission to find the problem, and then it will surface it in its own time. And what came up is something happened in early childhood where she was watching this show on TV and it really scared her. I mean, this is like 3 and 4 years old. So once that came up, then I, just like the man the other day, I led her into simply releasing that fear. And once she did, the night terror stopped. So that's the concept behind this. And what I'm seeing, this is really interesting, Jackie. I was working with a lady, she was dealing with just rheumatoid arthritis for so many years. And I led her through the same concept of just asking herself, where is this source? And it was someone that she had held unforgiveness towards. Unforgiveness is a big thing that we hold on to that gets us out of alignment. And so I led her just to forgive that person, right? And the way you do it, I forgive John, is you have to verbalize it because verbalizing it makes it real,
Yeah.
right? Speaking it out. So I led her just to verbalize forgiving that person. And by the end of the day or the next day, she had no more arthritis pain and it never returned. So this is the type of stuff that I'm seeing that I wrote the book Outrageous Peace for, is the entryway into understanding this framework so people can start to get settled back in their life, not always be angry and upset and irritable,
Yeah.
not always just frustrated. Starting the new year, I'm going to set these goals because I don't like who I am. I want to change myself. And what's happening is there's something internally that's out of whack, out of balance. And once you put it back in balance, everything calms down.
That's so interesting. And I know people, a lot of people were so curious about you on their first episode. And listening to this one, a lot of people will be trying this process because they're suffering. A
Yeah,
lot of people are suffering. Right, and they
yeah,
want to end the suffering. So and just to let my listeners know, Beatty, this is part 1 of our show. We are doing a part 2, which will be a live call-in show where people can ask their questions and we can answer them, and but that will
yep,
be coming. So I have before we wrap up, I have 2 more questions for you.
perfect.
While writing Outrageous Peace, where did you struggle most personally, and has this book changed the way that you handle conflict in your own life?
I hate to say no, because I have no conflict in my life. This is the thing that once I started to understand these principles that our first show on the prayer of freedom came about, and now this one on outrageous peace, it's all the same swimming pool. It's just a matter of the framework in which you start to understand it and start to engage it. So for me, it's outrageous peace hasn't made an impact in my life. It was written to help make an impact in others because I've already gone through the process. I've already swum through the deep end, right? I've already gone down to the, 15 feet down and cleaned the drain down there. Right now, we're just trying to get people to get their feet in the water and go, "Ooh, this is kind of chilly water," or "Boy, this feels kind of good." You know, when you get in the swimming pool
Yeah.
and you get further into it, and then you start to learn to swim. So I forget your first question, but
Yeah.
that was the second question.
Well, I said, "Did you struggle writing Outrageous Peace?" Most
I did, it was actually one of the easiest things I'd ever written because all I was trying to do is really simplify this approach, and I'd already had kind of a grid of what was going on and wanting to simplify it from the standpoint that I wanted to make it easy for people to understand so they wouldn't reject it because so many of us are walking around with lives that are unsettling, lives that we've lost peace in our life. There's conflict in our family relationships. There's friction in our internal life. Like, I remember I was talking to this guy named David, and he was really racked up with anxiety and depression. he's 40 years old. It's been since he was 14 years old, so 26 years. And the medical community says your hope is hopeless. I mean, this is the interesting thing. I want to comment on this because this is really powerful to understand. My father-in-law, who's now been deceased for 24 years, he was an internal medicine doctor for 50 years. And he would always tell every patient, health is based on three pillars: mental, physical, and spiritual. The same thing, those three legs of that stool. And so he had an incredibly high success rate in helping his patients get well because he would first find out what their issue was, name it. Then he would interview them to identify where the source most likely was, which is locate it. And then if it was a spiritual issue, like an unforgiveness or stress or irritability at someone, he would help them release it. And what's happened in the medical community now is they removed that third leg, and now it's only mental or physical, and that doesn't solve most of these problems that stay persistent. So this guy, David, had been, caught in the medical community there, and I'm not blaming them. They just stopped teaching that part of it. And so I guided him in this process of this outrageous peace and how to let your inner self have permission to go back to what hurt it originally, that you shoved it down. You say, don't talk to me about it again. So your inner self kind of shies away and goes, okay, I won't do anything. Now you have to give it permission. You have to, I know this sounds kind of corny, but if you think about a child that you've traumatized because of how harsh you push back on them, you have to really work hard to give them a safe place to then talk. So you have to do that to your inner self, give it a safe spot. And it may take a day or two, but something's going to surface. Just like when you have this problem you're working through in your mind, you can't figure it out. So you just put it aside. And now you're taking a shower several days later, a week later, and the whole answer comes fully developed, boom, right there in the shower.
Yeah.
It's when you're least thinking about it because your mind has been working on it subconsciously
Right.
and then it surface it. That's how your inner self will work. Once you give it permission and say, I'm trying to get rid of this, whatever, you name it, then it will go back and research its records. And what am I holding on to that's driving this, that's keeping me out of balance? And it'll surface it. And then once it surfaces, you go, oh, that's right. I need to release that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you start to release it.
Okay. So name it, locate it, release it.
That's it.
Okay. Well, Beatty Carmichael, thank you for joining for part one. And
Yes.
yes, as I mentioned, part two will be next for our listeners to call in and type in their questions, and you'll be there live and we'll address their questions. I can hardly wait.
Yes. And let me, just in case people aren't on the video part, if you have questions, want to learn more about Outrageous Peace, just add a .com, outrageouspeace.com. And if you've got anything that you're struggling with that you didn't even know that maybe it could be released, like anxiety or depression or chronic pain or things of that sort, then check it out. It's really been powerful in people's lives.
Yes. Yes, it really, really has. And it was a great read, by the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Beatty Carmichael, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Beatty, thank you for opening this conversation and helping us rethink what peace really means, not as something fragile that we must constantly chase, but as something that becomes steady when what's underneath is brought back into alignment. This has been part one of our discussion on outrageous peace. In part two, we'll go deeper into how this principle applies in everyday life and what people can begin doing today to experience lasting peace. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode of Different Facets of Happiness. I'm Jackie Denise.